if you have an average, what we call average, or the lowest that I would want to see is a 16 dry matter density. He's saying that the dry matter loss at 80 days on a 16 is 15%. If you get to 22, where I think the majority of the better dairies are, you're at 10% dry matter loss. That's 5% savings just on getting it packed the way that you should. You take a 10,000 ton pile, just for easy numbers, that's worth $50 a ton. You can go higher, lower, whatever forage you want. That's $500,000.
There's just about nowhere in the entire world where livestock can graze very high quality forage 365 days a year. We are going to have to store forage to have a profitable livestock operation. What are some of the advantages that you two see by storing that forage as silage and embracing the idea of using fermentation to keep a crop?
You want me to start? I'll give it a whirl first, and then I'll take all your bling from you, Jason.
Yeah, thanks.
So, looking at 10,000-foot view of this, in the climates that we market in, adequate amounts of fresh forage are only available from the spring or late spring until early autumn, right? So we have to preserve those forages either as a baled hay or as a silage like we talk about today. And we have to do that in order to lock in the nutritional value and create reliable feed sources regardless of that weather or the time of the year. So by ensiling that wetter crop in a silo or a pile or into a bunker, or even wrap bales, you have to do that. And we'll probably talk about the proper packing and things like that later in the podcast. But that way, if we get that right, then certain bacteria, which near and dear to my heart would be lactic acid bacteria, they have the ability to ferment the available sugars in that forage, and that'll create acids. And that acidification process helps preserve the forage's overall mass. So it's dry matter per se, and also its nutrients. We can lock in those nutrients, and so they don't continue to change and they don't decay. So that way the farm can have a reliable feed source throughout the year that she can utilize when feed becomes scarce, or you can't grow it fresh. So silages of plant, whole plant corn or corn itself or wheat or various other, grasses or alfalfa. That's the predominant things that we ensile here and utilize here in North America for the dairy and the beef cattle.
Perfect. Well, Jason, I'm sure he left a little bit on the bone for you. Where do you see the value of embracing making silage as a way to preserve feed?
Well, really, the cool thing is we can see hundreds of years of harvest practices all still going on in the United States. You've got Amish communities which are still making corn shocks and pitching hay onto a wagon. I can remember seeing the claws that come down and pick up hay and bring it up and drop it into a hay mow. These different harvest practices have going on for years because of exactly what you outlined. We can't let cows on pasture 12 months out of the year and have them. We have to supplement it. We've just gotten better as farms have progressed and technology has come into place. We have learned really what we're after and what we've learned and what you can see from those communities that use hundreds of year-old harvest practices to the latest and greatest with huge equipment. We've gotten better at preserving nutrients. And that's what we're looking to do for those animals. And the better we can get at preserving nutrients, making it very available and easy to use so that the dairyman or the farmer can easily and efficiently get it in front of the animal in a way that they can eat it when they want, at their leisure, keep them full, put good nutrition together. That's what we're talking about today. And we have gotten really good at using bags, piles, silos, different ways to ferment feed, and we've studied all of them. So it's cool. It's cool that we're able to take a crop out of the field and really preserve it really well, and have the animals get a lot of nutrition out of it.
Let's turn this back over to Dave. Take us through the process of a good fermentation, along with pointing out where some things can go wrong at different steps, please.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So the ensiling process explained. To reiterate what we mentioned earlier, ensiling is essentially the process of rapidly acidifying the forage crop, whether it be a grass or a corn or a wheat or alfalfa, to preserve that crop. As Jason said, to preserve its nutrients, right? So the livestock can eat it over the subsequent months when it's not conducive to be able to grow fresh feed. So the goal is to rapidly convert those sugars into acids to prevent spoilage. And it kind of uses a 4-step method. The whole ensiling process is break it down in simplified terms into 4 steps that relies on removing oxygen. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that in depth as we go along through this podcast. So the first step of ensiling would be called the aerobic process, or the aerobic phase, or the breathing phase, if you will. So what happens right after the crop is harvested and put into storage, whether it be a clamp or a pit or a bunker, whatever the case may be, the plant's still breathing, right? It's still using up any kind of remaining trapped oxygen. The goal is to rapidly and completely get rid of that oxygen as quickly as possible. So make this aerobic phase as short as possible. So the aim is to get rid of that oxygen quickly and efficiently and stop that plant from wasting its own sugar and all the other nutrients that also would go away through the respiration process. So the longer this aerobic phase is, the more opportunity for dry matter loss and energy loss occurs. So that's because the plant continues to respire, and also you got microbial respiration. So both of those we can stop if we, do good packing and you maybe use some additives that tie up that oxygen, get rid of that oxygen. So that's that we want to make that as short as possible, that breathing phase, and then we can jump into fermentation. Once that oxygen is gone, then fermentation can occur, and that's the real crux of fermentation, is that acidification. That's where the good bacteria, lactic acid bacteria, again near and dear to my heart, those lactic acid bacteria, for lack of a better word, eat or consume those plant sugars and convert them to acid. They do that hopefully very efficiently. There's certain bacteria out there that do it more efficiently than others, and we want to utilize those. We want to promote those. So the LABs, these lactic acid bacteria, metabolically convert those sugars into acids, and in the most efficient and the most energy dense and strongest acid that can be produced is lactic acid. We can talk about that at a later time or in a different podcast, why lactic acid is so important. But that acid lowers the pH, and it helps preserve that forage mass, because the acidification stops unwanted microbes from growing, like maybe some E. coli or bacillus or some yeast or things like that. That acidification stops the plant cells themselves from respiring, and also it stops the plant enzymes from breaking down the plant further, like the ashes to ashes, dust to dust scenario. It'll break down itself into, the proteins will get broken down, the carbohydrates would be broken down and utilized through respiration. We don't want that to occur. So that's the fermentation phase. And then next we get into storage, or the stable phase. Once the acid level is high enough, then it gives kind of like what we call feedback inhibition. It tells the bacteria, stop. There's no reason to make any more acid. They're still there, but there's no reason to make any more acid. The pH is down at a point where we've ceased respiration, we've ceased unwanted competition from bad bacteria or mold or yeast or things like that. So now we're stable. So the goal is to get that done as quickly as possible. And then that forage is essentially stable. It can be utilized or fed for many, many, many months or even years if need be. And then there's the feed out phase. And if we've done all these other things right, then that feed out phase, if we could use good management practices and keep a clean face, then that face, we can have a reliable feed source that we can feed off of again for many, many months. So that's kind of, the key things there. Maybe to reiterate, maybe the key requirements for success would be sugar content. The plant's got to have if there's adequate sugars there, then there's adequate amount of resources for the bacteria to utilize that sugar to make acid. So, a lot of guys will use, and maybe Jason can talk about this too. People will use scissor cuttings, or they'll even use bricks, bricks refractometers to look what the sugar content is.
Yep. Yep.
So,
so even occasionally, even the best managed farm will have something break down, and a load or a truck has to sit even overnight before it can be unloaded. Is it that respiration aspect that is creating all that heat because as it sits on that wagon, it has oxygen, or is it something different?
No, you're exactly right, Mike. It's respiration process. The plant itself is continuing to respire, and any kind of microbes that have access to oxygen are also attempting, they're also respiring. So that respiration process is the breakdown or utilization of sugars through the respiration pathway, and the end products are heat, carbon dioxide, right? And so that's the problem. And we want now the upside is, I guess, if it is broken down, it's been treated on that, with some kind of, bacteria that would help limit that respiration, that is beneficial.
So when you talk about heat, and this is maybe almost too simplistic once again, but it isn't the worst part of that forage and fiber that we burn to generate that heat, is it?
No, exactly. It's always it's never the logs, if you will. It's of the tree that burn up. It's always the leaves and the twigs that you would start a fire with, right? And you can equate those leaves and twigs to the sugar, the really fermentable sugars. Just nature doesn't want to expend any more energy than it has to. So it's going to utilize the path of least resistance, which is those simple sugars. They're going to utilize those, the respiration microbes are going to utilize those before they would ever, start to secrete some kind of enzyme to break down the logs, to break down the really complex fiber. So the bad news is that if you utilize those up, then there's less for the lactic acid bacteria to make, to use to make acids quickly and efficiently. So then you have to, then they have to rely on enzymes or something else to help break that down.
Okay. So essentially, if we could figure out a way to burn lignin, we wouldn't mind so much. But since we're losing the best of the best, this is a big problem.
Right. Yep. It can be a real big problem, right? So, yep, exactly. Yeah. We're we're looking at things like ligninases or lactases all the time, right? I mean, those are the things they could help with that process down the road, later in the fermentation process, or later in the siling process, but not initially.
That's a nice, concise, and understandable trip through the fermentation process. Dave has hammered a couple of times on the necessity of excluding oxygen. On farms, that usually winds up being called, is it packed well enough? And I'd like to go through, and these first two will probably hit pretty quickly, but I'd like to go through both upright silos, silage bags, and then drive over piles, bunkers, and talk about the management we need to employ to get that oxygen excluded. So let's start with upright silos. What would be some of your tips for trying? And if you want to maybe even start, Jason, if you'd rather start on why we need to get this packed well, you take it from here and go the direction you want to go.
Yeah. Well, more and more I try to drive this home by drawing a correlation from animal feed to human feed. And we're getting closer to understanding that. Dave's talked a lot about microbes and bad microbes, and if you don't preserve something, well, go back to the industrial age. They didn't know how to preserve food when we started moving to cities, and people got sick left and right because they didn't have refrigeration, they didn't have freezers. They had to learn how to handle food, and then shortly after that, President Truman put the FDA in place, put regulations in place. We started to learn how to handle food. Interestingly enough, Clarence Birdseye was a hermit up in northern Canada and pulled fish out of the ice. And at 40 below zero, they froze immediately. And he figured out that's a really good way to preserve food, is to quickly flash freeze it. And now you can still buy Birdseye products in the store today. And when I correlate that to farmers and animal production, we use the word feed hygiene. What are we after? Same thing that happened to humans when there are microbes and molds and yeast and junk in the feed. It causes upsets in the stomach of those animals as well. So I try to talk about feed hygiene, and Dave talked about a lot of the science of it. And really, it's about preserving, zip-locking. I mean, what do we do with our food? Let's draw those correlations. We vacuum seal our high dollar steaks and wrap them 3 times so they don't get freezer burn. When we take a bag of chips, we seal it up, we press all the air out of it, we seal that Ziploc bag because we don't want to eat stale chips. So now let's transition that into animal. If we talk about feed hygiene, those animals don't want to eat mold and yeast and funky haylage that's got black slime in it. And farmers are starting to realize this is important for animals. Now, when you look at structures, Dave talked about a lot of it. It's oxygen. It's getting the oxygen out so it can't respire. And then the acids will change and preserve the feed. So just quickly to run through some of those. Yeah, the upright silo was one of the first probably technologies to really preserve feed. Does a great job. The key things there are getting it in a good speed. Cut length and moisture is a big one. If you put dry feed into a silo, it's just not going to pack. A silo it takes the force of the feed and presses it down. And if we have better moisture, it's going to press better. It's going to fill those gaps better. We're going to exclude oxygen much better. But you still have a good amount of waste usually on the top of a silo where it doesn't pack. And that's why the guys will tell you they go up there to level off the silo and that feed is hot. It's probably 110, 120 degrees because that oxygen is respiring on the top of the silo. So you got to get it leveled off quickly. If you aren't going to use it right away, guys will put a cover on there to try to exclude oxygen. Then you come to the bag. Baggers can be tough. There's a lot going on there. I have worked with a lot of different bags, and nothing's more frustrating than get spotty mold in that bag. So when you're working with a bag, again, cut length and moisture are important, but I've learned that you've got to have the knives sharpened, where those knives pass through, that gap can't be worn so that it's not breaking it up, and then you get larger chunks in the bag, and that keeps oxygen in there. The size of tractor and the speed you put it in. If you put it in too fast and you don't have a big enough tractor to press it into that bag right, you get a bag where you can shove your arm in and oxygen can travel ahead of you. So bags can be a challenge as well. When you're looking at hay or baleage, the wrapping is very important. We're after excluding oxygen in all of these situations. Then you get to bunkers and piles, and that's where I think most of the industry is going, right? You want me to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly work on farms. Agri-King has valuable clients on farms of all different sizes, but we are certainly at a point where there are more tons of feed put up in the United States in bunkers and piles than probably all other forms combined at this point. And I think in some ways it's nice. It can be actually one of the areas that gives you the most control, like you said, with upright silos. That, you know, those top 10 feet, I don't care how many kids you get up there running around on top of the silo, they're just not going to pack very well. But with a bunker, you can bring some more tools to bear on it, if you will. But there's also the ability to make a lot more mistakes on bunkers and piles, because it comes down to some finer points of management that some places do and some people come a little short on. So let's dig rather intensively into that field.
Yeah, and I will touch on Dave. Dave mentioned quality and sugars, and the better quality forage we bring in from the field, the better it's going to store. It's going to ferment better. It's going to store better. Moisture is important. Guys got most of that. So when we're going to get into the detail a little bit more on packing and things like that, again, I'll draw a correlation. Speed is so important. If you're taking a break from harvest and you have a salad and you eat half the salad, you set it on the armrest of your truck and it's 90 degrees, and you come back 2 hours later, are you still going to eat that salad? No, because it's going to be wilted, it's going to be slimy, it's going to be gross. Well, guess what? The same thing happens if you take a chopper box full of haylage and leave it sit there for a couple hours with hay air in it. It turns really quickly. There's so many correlations to what we do with our food. What we do with our food is we seal it up, cover it, get it in the fridge as soon as we can. So speed of getting this feed, this high quality feed that we've grown into a structure, eliminating the oxygen is very important. So yes, choppers, wagons, getting it done, balers, wrapping the bales, you know, you can go to all these different types of harvests. It has to be done quickly. So we're learning that over time. But as we get into the piles and bunkers, I want to touch on, you know, alleviating oxygen. We're getting better at this also. When I started 15 years ago, guys were happy if they had a density of, you know, 12 to 15. They thought they were doing good. Now your progressive farmers are getting a pack density that's 20, over 20. They're doing all they can to get the oxygen out. So let's touch on a few things that are important.
Before you go there, let's just back up a half step.
Okay.
Describe for everybody how you're measuring that density.
Yeah.
Not just what the number is. I mean, you're counting the number of loads that go into how many square feet. Is it a math problem? Explain how we're actually measuring that.
Yeah. So we couple of things are important, and you're able to measure how well you did on your storage structure. One is temperature. We use temperature probes. You can put them in the pile. You can monitor the first several days. You can monitor it right after you're done packing and see a difference in temperature. That's how oxygen is reacting if it's not packed right. So temperature is one. And then the density, really, we don't measure that until you open that face. Whether it's a pile or a bunker, you got to have a good open face. You're into it a little ways. And then we take a 2-inch pipe on a drill and we drill into that face. And we have the calculations that show, you know, based on that circumference, and then we do the moisture and we weigh the grams that we take out of there. And then we can tell you what your as fed density would be. That's with the moisture in it. But the real number we're logging and tracking is a dry matter density, where we take all the moisture out of it and we tell you how many pounds of dry matter you have per square inch. And that's how we are setting benchmarks for guys.
Right.
So
Now, go back to where you were. I just wanted to be sure everyone understood what we meant.
yeah, no, that's really good. So when you're bringing that feed in, there are several factors that help you get better density. You can bring it in too fast. You have to line all these things up. If you've got 3 choppers working in one pack tractor, you got a problem there too. So you have to line this all up so that there's 5 factors that I'm going to touch on. The thickness, the layers, how thin you spread it, the weight of what you're putting on that pile. There's all kinds of different calculations for that. How to build the pile. You got to have a plan for what we call a progressive wedge, or how you're going to build it front to back. And then how you have to, packing procedures would be, driving the whole surface and making multiple passes. So as we go through some of those things, I'll just run through some of those, and then I'll get into what that means when you get better density. So 6-inch layers is the goal. And this is easier said than done. I get it. I can stand here and tell guys you need 6-inch layers, but then I go out and I watch structures. Man, you got this huge tractor with a 14-foot blade on a rounded pile. Well, how do you, right? Every pile is not perfectly flat, so you got angles to work with, but we do our best to keep thin layers spread, because you cannot lay down 2 foot of haylage and get that packed properly. Adding weight to that doesn't compensate for a thin layer. So we want thin layers, and a good pack guy to get the thin layers. Here's an example. I had a farm that I went out to, and they had spotty mold in the bunker, and I was all concerned about it because I thought we did a good job. And the guy, after we talked for a little while, he said, "Oh yeah, my uncle packed that one, and he was dropping big wads of feed, and we couldn't get it packed." And right where he explained that, they had mold because he dropped a big wad of feed and just drove over it once, and there's going to be oxygen penetration there because that density isn't going to happen. So thin layers are very important. Tractor weight, there's a number of different ways to calculate that. And, in some farms it works, in some farms it doesn't. There's a rule of 18, but the more popular one is probably the rule of 18. Sorry, I'm moving too fast. You take the weight of the tractor, divide it by 18, and then you get how many minutes you're supposed to be on the pile. So just to keep it simple, most of that math with the tractors we're using today, you should be packing about a half a minute for every ton of wet feed that comes in. Well, start thinking about that. It's a 20-ton load. A half a minute, you should pack for 10 minutes. That's not just pushing the feed around. That's packing for 10 minutes. Well, that isn't always feasible, so we have to have a plan that works on the farm. And then the rule of 800, that tells you take how many tons per hour are coming into the bunker or pile, and you want 800 pounds on that. So you want 800 pounds of packing weight per ton of forage. So you do that math, and the example I have in front of me, you have 45 tons per hour coming in. You need 36,000 tons or 36,000 pounds on that pile. Well, again, you look at that. If you have today's equipment, if you have 2 choppers, you're probably getting closer to 100 tons an hour coming into that pile. And also you got to have 2 pack tractors and a push tractor just to do a decent job. So you have to kind of plan these things out, use some of these tools. And you can't assume that the push tractor, the math they give you from Cornell here is that the pushing tractor really only packs about half the time. So you got to cut that weight calculation in half. So there's a lot of homework that you can do to get the weight of the tractor right.
When just for a rough number, what would let's compare a 300 plus horsepower 4-wheel drive row crop tractor weighted the way you would send one out, and a 8-wheeler and articulated, both of them with blades, both of them set up to pack. Ballpark the weight on each of those for me, please.
Oh boy, I think the biggest John Deere out there now is pushing 60,000 pounds. You know, and you got all stages in between. That's a big articulate with duals on it and a big blade. They might even be pushing 70,000 pounds. So you get several of those on a pile, you're putting some weight down. So
Okay.
that's good.
Perfect.
I'm not going to get into the other stuff. The only other thing I would say is, please don't let the pack tractor stop. Just keep going. You know, it's after you get that pushed, that should be a necessity on farm. Let me just give you some numbers on what this correlates into. So this is work from Keith Bolson that he did, and I've seen this bear out on farm. If you have, and this is a chart we can maybe put into the video later, but an average, what we call average, or the lowest that I would want to see, is a 16 density, dry matter density. He's saying that the dry matter loss at 80 days on a 16 is 15%. And if you get up to 18, it drops. If you get to 22, where I think the majority of the better dairies are, you're at 10% dry matter loss. That's 5% savings just on getting it packed the way that you should. So, you know, you take a 10,000 ton pile, which is pretty common, and let's say, just for easy numbers, that's worth $50 a ton. You can go higher, lower, whatever forage you want. That's $500,000. You take 5% of $500,000, you know, you're talking some real money just to put. It easily pays for the cost of that. $25,000 just to get the pack better. And that's only one return on investment for getting it packed well. Your nutrients are going to be better. Your feed is going to feed better. So really, it's a no-brainer to get the pack right, to get it sealed up, to get it put away, and to allow it to ferment properly.
I think for some reason, farmers are catching up. They're doing better, but they were quicker to realize they couldn't haul corn off a 12-row combine with 200 bushel gravity boxes nearly as efficiently as trailers.
Yep.
And the fascination with bigger choppers and more of them for a while really outpaced people's ability to pack. I think, you know, choppers are probably cooler than packing tractors. Maybe that was where you wanted to spend your money. But I do agree with you. I think there's more awareness. I think it's getting better.
So do you think, again, going back to the correlation of food, how many of you buy name brand freezer bags, or do you just wrap it in cellophane when you put something in the freezer? What if, you know, do we feel Ziploc or vacuum sealing our food is better than a Ziploc? All of these things make a difference too. And I have a study here that says an uncovered silage pile will lose 25% to dry matter loss. If we put one layer of 4 or 5 mil plastic on there, that drops it down to 10 to 15% dry matter loss. And then if we go the next step better with an oxygen barrier and a good quality plastic, we're getting under 10% dry matter loss. So again, you can draw the correlation to food because people get it. The better plastic, the more you hold oxygen out, the better it preserves food longer. It's the same thing on a pile. And the understanding of that is still, we're growing. There's still guys throwing tires that have wires hanging out of them and it's ripping the plastic, or they're sending their people up there and punching holes in the plastic. One last story. I know we're getting long, but California likes to build these trapezoids. Sorry, California, not picking on you, but it's true. And then I see them hire a team to come out there and cover that pile, and they tie their tires together. These guys are walking around with cowboy boots making a hole every time they try to climb up this steep edge to put tires on. We got to do it all. It's got to be sealed up.
Well, under the heading of, and now a word from your sponsor, I'd like Jason, we have never and will never position Silo-King to take the place of good management. This is not a miracle in a bag that is going to make someone who doesn't pack at all have zero dry matter loss, and the world's a very happy place. At the same time, a quality product like Silo-King used correctly can play a big role in really maximizing this fermentation process. So to give Jason a chance to catch his breath, let's go back to Dave. And you literally, most of your professional career, you've been working on constantly improving Silo-King. I used to tell people all of our bags should probably have new and improved on them, because I don't think you've ever sent the exact same stuff out 2 years in a row without playing with some bacteria or an enzyme. So how are the 4 basic ingredients in Silo-King helping that fermentation process you described go as well as possible?
Yeah. So thanks. I maybe I'll preface it, and Jason kind of alluded to this. One thing that a lot of people have heard me say is we're not alchemists. We can't turn lead into gold, and we sure as heck can't turn poor feed going into the silo or the pile into great feed coming back out. So number one, you got to set the stage by harvesting good forages, right? And then Silo-King is a tool that you can utilize, just like good pack is necessary, but Silo-King is another tool that you can utilize. Silo-King, the way we formulate it, is for good reason. We use antioxidants and potassium sorbate, which is a preservative or a mold and yeast inhibitor. We utilize those to help tie up oxygen, stop respiration, stop unwanted microbes like your mold and your yeast. Those things help that process along with good pack. So that helps set the stage and gets things right for the lactic acid bacteria. The lactic acid bacteria, proprietary only to Agri-King, and we utilize those, and we've checked them over many, many years over all these different forage types, and see that they run a really good relay race. And people have heard me talk about this, that the bacteria hand off the process to the next one, and that way you can direct and take control of the fermentation from beginning to end. And those bacteria, we've done some really recent studies that are going to be published in the near term that shows that they control the process all the way through. We can watch their metabolism go all the way through, and then as we know, it's our bacteria taking control of it. But I mean, taking control, they can utilize the various sugars that the enzymes have released in Silo-King and or the natural plant sugars, and they can use those to quickly and efficiently make acids, and specifically lactic acid, which is, again, the strongest acid, drops the pH quickly and efficiently, quote unquote, a flash fermentation, that we get it done quickly and efficiently to lock in those nutrients. So that's kind of the 10,000 foot view of how and why we've formulated Silo-King the way we have. Antioxidants, antifungals, to help stop the respiration and stop unwanted microbes from kind of utilizing those nutrients or taking any kind of control of the fermentation process. Enzymes and the bacteria work hand in hand to help create acids quickly and efficiently, and also break down some of the complex fibers, the complex starches, to allow those to be utilized quickly and efficiently within the rumen of the cow. When ultimately we're making it, as Jason alluded to, we want a really high quality feed to go into our high quality animals so they can perform very well.
So Jason, we got the smart guy's answer. Let's get the common man's answer.
So, right. It's Dave has done a phenomenal job with Silage-King. It is a product like nothing else, and it ties into everything that I've talked about already. Speed of fermentation. There's other products out there that are going to get you down to a 4.2 pH and get you a decent lactic to acetic ratio. But I'm telling you, Silage-King does it in days, and they're doing it in weeks. And it's a speed of preserving our nutrients that, again, gives us the return on investment. Just like I said with these plastics, saving dry matter loss, density, saving dry matter loss, speed of fermentation saves dry matter loss and nutrients. And this, my experience over time and using Silage-King, I've done the temperature, and just last year on corn silage with our new corn silage and grain product, I did some temperature studies, and that feed was fermented, stable, not heating anymore in 3 to 5 days. And other treated stuff is 10 to 14 days. Untreated stuff is up to 21 days where it's still heating. It's still respiring. And this was same farm, same pack. So the design of Silage-King, it's all about the cows. It's all about saving nutrients and digestibilities and preserving it fast. And if we can save you another 2 to 5% dry matter loss, depending on your management, it's a no-brainer. It does a great job.
Hey, that is well put, guys. You did a wonderful, wonderful job. I appreciate both of you being here today. Chris, this might be another 15 minutes while you tell us what you learned today, because there's a lot of knowledge being thrown around this room.
Yeah, you guys are passionate. I love it. I've told Jason this before, but Mr. Spangler, you're Dr. Spangler, you're passionate as well. I love it. I'm gonna just take what Dr. Spangler said is 4-step method of aerobic. So it's breathing, fermentation, the sugars to acids, storage phase, and then the final, the feed out. And also, Jason does not like soggy salads.
No. Neither do
Cool.
cows.
No, nobody does that, I don't think. It's a good analogy, though. I love it. Love it. If you like what we're talking about, or you have any suggestions of what you'd like to hear, please email us at podcast@agriking.com. Jason and Dr. Spangler, thank you so much for your time.
All righty.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you. Thanks.